training series with the mortgage calculator. Welcome, everyone. We will wait just a minute to get started here. Let us go live on all the different platforms, so give us just 1 minute. In the meantime, we did put the chat up on the screen, so feel free to drop a comment there in the chat. I see lots of people were on early commenting. Shout out to Robert, Megan, Irene, Adam, Sonara, Matthew, Julio, Gary, Oscar, Nicole, Jason, Mark, Vanessa, Rob. Wow, lots of people tuning in here, dropping comments. Heather, Arjun, Corey, Floyd, Amanda. Feel free to keep dropping comments there as we get live on all these different platforms. We are streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So let us get up on all the different platforms here. It takes just a second. Hope everyone's been having a great week so far. Great topic that we're going to go through today. And it looks like we are ready to get started. So what we'll do is take the chat off the screen there and we will go ahead and get into it. So welcome everyone to the Loan Officer Training Series with the Mortgage Calculator. My name is Kyle Hershey. I am the COO of the Mortgage Calculator, joined here by our president, Nick Hershey, and our sales manager, Jose Gonzalez. We do our loan officer trainings at 7 p.m. Eastern every Tuesday and Wednesday night. We have a different topic every week, and this week's topic is going to be working with foreign national buyers. So we're going to be on a foreign national topic here for the week, both today and tomorrow. But the first part of this is going to be discussing working with foreign national buyers in general. And I'm going to kick it over to Jose here to talk more about that. But before you go into your presentation, Jose, for the first part, well, I guess the first part of your presentation is always going to be what is and what isn't a foreign national borrower. We talked about that today on our morning show where we go through the live rates. And so most importantly, what is and what is not a foreign national borrower. Uh-oh. Is Jose frozen there?
Yeah, he got frozen for a second. Give him a second. He'll come back.
All right. Nick, you want to talk about what a foreign national buyer is?
I'm back. He's back.
I don't know what happened. We had some little glitches going on there. Sorry about that.
All right.
Okay, so talking a little bit about foreign national buyer. I have a little bit of a lag there, huh? So foreign national borrowers, there's a lot of confusion when we're dealing with borrowers that are from another country, right? Borrowers that are not U.S. citizens, borrowers that do not have a U.S. green card, the permanent resident alien card, right? So those are going to be either a non-permanent resident alien, that's somebody that is working here legally in the United States with some type of a work authorization permit. Maybe they have an H-1B visa, like the specialty workers, technology, stuff like that, the nurses that are coming in, to help out in those specialty fields where we may not have enough people in this country to fill the need. They get the H-1B visas, right? They are legally allowed to work here. That borrower, even though they do not have a green card, quote unquote, they can get every kind of loan that a national borrower can get. They can get a conventional loan, they can get an FHA loan, they can get your non-QM loans, as long as they have the credit, as long as they meet the U.S. credit standards for the loan, and as long as they meet whatever requirements for income that there is for that loan, they can get the same loan that a national borrower can get. So that's our non-permanent resident alien, right? Then the next category, which would be, I guess, a step down in the being a U.S. National type, would be your ITIN borrower, ITIN, which is an acronym for Individual Taxpayer Identification Number. That's a number that this individual will obtain so that they can file a U.S. tax return. They cannot obtain a Social Security number because they do not have legal residence permanent resident status in the US. So that's your I-10 borrower. The I-10 borrower gets a little closer to the foreign national because they do not have legal status as a permanent resident in this country. They do not have a work permit to legally work here. However, they are working here, they're deriving their income from here, and they're filing tax returns here. And the I-10 borrower, to get a loan, is also required to have credit here in the US. So they're, like 1 foot here, or 2/3 of their body is here, I guess, right? They just missing the green card, but they can still get financing. And remember, key note here is they derive their income inside the US. Now, our foreign national borrower, which would be the one furthest removed from our national borrower, does not derive their income in the US for qualification purposes if income is to be used. Now, don't confuse that with a DSCR loan, which is going to be one of the options where we use the rental income generated by the property to qualify the borrower, but that's not income on a personal income basis, right? That's income generated by the property. So, the foreign national, if income is to be used, their income is to be generated outside of the United States. No credit is required, but if they do have credit, US based credit, then all the parameters apply as far as credit. There's going to be a trade line requirement, and there's going to be a minimum credit score requirement as well if they happen to have US credit. If your borrower does not have US credit, that's okay. That's actually probably better. However, at that point, depending on where we are going to be submitting that loan, we may be using a 680 minimum credit score for pricing, or a 700 minimum credit score for pricing. That's just for pricing purposes. That has nothing to do with they actually needing to have that credit score. Please don't get confused. They do not have to have a credit, but we need to input something into the pricing engines so that we get accurate credit. So now you know what the foreign national is not and what they are. So let me give you a little bit of insight on those of you that are looking to expand your business. And let me give you another bit of a little tip and trick here. For those of you that are on our team, the foreign national leads plan are the biggest bang for your buck in terms of the number of leads. So you may want to diversify your leads plan choices to go with like a combo, right? Do DSCR national and then do foreign national as well, and you're going to get a whole lot of leads for your money from the foreign national. And with that being said, this should excite you. The dollar volume you're looking at, this is 2022 data from Profile of International Transactions in U.S. Residential Real Estate, compiled by the National Association of Realtors. I'm also a realtor. That's where I obtained this info. So 2022 highlights $59 billion in volume, right, for a 12-month period there. And that was up to May 2022. And mind you, most of them are still trying to get their visas. So this is accelerating. 98,600 foreign buyer existing home purchases during that same period. Right, that's a whole lot. Where are the top countries? Canada with 11% of all business, Mexico with 8%, China with 6%, India with 5%, Brazil with 3%, and Colombia with 3%. Where are the top destinations that they're buying? Again, these are marketing ideas here, right? Marketing that you could be reaching out to, and then marketing depending on the states where you may want your licensing, right, as well. Real important stuff here. Florida, 24% of the action in Florida, right? And we love Florida. California, I mean, that's a given there as well. And Texas, I mean, those are 3 strong states. We love those states. We get a lot of deals. But then look at Arizona, New York State, and wow, North Carolina. They love those mountains, right? A lot of good stuff. By the way, the median purchase price for foreign nationals is also higher than a national buyer by a few thousand, right? The median purchase price for foreign national 366,100 compared to 355,700 for US. So, a little bit 2-3% higher there, but in reality it's actually a little bit more than that. Uh, so and here's some areas again, so you could have some ideas where they're purchasing, where they're from, different destinations. You get to see some of the same people being repeated here, but like where are the Canadians buying? Well, majority of them buying in Florida. Then you got Arizona and California.
I don't think they can really read that. Why don't you? Can you highlight which one you're talking about?
Right here in this one right here, the major destinations where we're talking about Florida, Arizona, and California are the major destinations for Canadians with 45%, 23%, and 12%. Then Mexicans are, I mean, obviously they're right there. Texas, 22%, but then you got Florida and California. So we're seeing this pattern, right? But then look at the Chinese buyers, 31% California, 10% New York, 7% Indiana. They're loving that farmland, huh? And then Florida. There's not more coming to Florida because we don't have a lot of direct flights, because that's really what it boils down to with the Chinese. It's a lot easier for them to get to California than it is for them to get to Florida. Then India, again, California, New Jersey for India, and Utah, right? Where those come from. And then Brazil, there's another easy one here, 55%. But then New Jersey again, and Wisconsin. I never would have thought that. And then Colombia, that's an easy one with 60% in Florida, 11% in Texas, and 9% in Maryland, and 8% in Virginia. And that has to do with, believe it or not, proximity to Washington, D.C. There's other South and Central Americans that like Maryland and Virginia because they have business in DC. So and then here we break it down into regions, so you can look at that at your leisure. But look at where now they break it down into Latin American, Caribbean, Europe. So they don't break it down into countries, but regions. So if you want to do your marketing, for example, and you want to target foreign buyers in general, well, 39% of Florida's foreign buyers come from Latin America. So 25% of Florida state, they call foreign buyers in Florida coming from North America. That's pretty funny, but that's because we're getting a lot of migration. So interesting stuff here. But now let's get into some of the meat and potatoes here, right? What can we do for our foreign nationals? What are they eligible to do? Well, they're eligible to do a lot of things, right? Purchase, rate and term, cash out, a little rehash here of that they're a citizen of another country where they can and can't derive their income. Keep note that not all visa types are acceptable. Right now, this is a key thing to know that will not be an issue with our DSCR product, one of our options that doesn't require a visa if they're not signing in the U.S. So at this point, if your person has a diplomatic visa, but they're not going to be signing in the U.S., that may not be an issue. Max LTV 75% across the board on purchase and rate and term, whether it's DSCR or full doc. That's the maximum, and 70% is the max in a best case scenario for the cash out refi. Now, if your borrower is looking to do any type of occupancy on the home, like as a second home or short-term rental, you're not going to do DSCR, but the full doc option will be a second home that you can do short-term rental when they're not occupying the property, but they can't do full-time short-term rental for that. Might as well just do investment. If they are doing full doc, there are additional requirements like CPA letters and reference letters. And if you're doing DSCR, that's always the most streamlined option, which I'm going to break it down a little bit more in depth here, right? So, as you know, DSCR, that is our flagship product, and the four nationals love it. Now, it is not a requirement to close the DSCR in an entity. Let's make that point clear because sometimes we can confuse the point that people need to be closing in an LLC to do a DSCR. That's not exactly the case. That's more about licensing and the MLOs. However, it is highly recommended that the foreign national close in an entity of some type, for liability purposes, for accounting purposes as well. There's a lot of different reasons why they would want to close in an LLC. The DSCR option is for investment only, never to be occupied by the borrower nor their family. So don't think that the DSCR is the easy button to not have to go full doc for a property that they're going to occupy, because they could run into some occupancy issues if the loan gets audited. So watch out for that. Now, the DSCR, the debt service coverage ratio, which is what DSCR is an acronym for, can be derived by a number of different ways. It's basically gross monthly rent as determined by, depending on the program option. It could be the long-term rent from the 1007, could be from Air DNA for purchases only, by the way, could be 12 months short-term rental revenue reports for purchases or refis as well. If they've owned the property less than 12 months, the minimum they'll accept is 6 months if they've owned it, 6 months, right? So a lot of different ways on that, but just to know that on the Air DNA option, there will usually be a 5% LTV reduction. So if you're pricing it out and using Air DNA and you need 80%, you have to find the 85% pricing and guidelines and then adjust your loan down that way. The STR revenue reports, we have an option that does not hit you with a 5% LTV reduction, but will limit the percentage of the total. It'll usually be 70 or 75% of the total that they'll let you use. And then they'll also limit how much they will let you increase the 1007 value, because that there is a limiting factor. It's usually going to be anywhere from 115 to 125% bump that you can get above the 1007 value using the short-term rental revenue reports. So realize what's going on there. There's going to be a haircut of 25 or 30% on the gross amount, and then that gross amount is capped at a max of anywhere from 115% to 125% of the long-term rent, as shown on the 1007, that also needs to be provided for that appraisal. So, it is a way to get around getting more value for that really amazing short-term rental property, but do your math well, because it may not be where you think it is after all the adjustments and jumping through hoops of fire just to end up at the same number as the 1007. So do your math well. Now, there are multiple DSCR options for the foreign nationals as well. So you got to be really diligent when you're searching your pricing engines and all the matrices, because we have options at 1.25 and above that's going to give a little bit better pricing. We have options at 1.0 to 1.25 that'll give great pricing and maximum LTV. But then we also have options at a 0.75 to a 0.99, meaning they are under a 1-to-1 ratio of the rent covering the housing expense, but we'll still do it. It's just going to be a reduced LTV. I believe that's a 70% LTV option. And we have even an option below 0.75, which is also at 70% LTV. So those are pretty good options for your foreign national from anywhere from below 0.75 to above 1.25 DSCR options. So the DSCR option, most of them out there will usually require the passport with a valid visa and with a CPA letter to document the housing expense of the borrower in their country, and will also require credit references, which could be in the form of a bank, or it could be from actual people like Mastercard and Visa, but from their country, not from the U.S. No U.S. based credit references. Now we do have, which I was just mentioning earlier, the streamlined DSCR option for foreign nationals. Slightly higher rate. I think in today's rate show, it was like a 0.5% difference in the rate from the DSCR option with ASK references and the streamline option. But this is really important because that means that you do not need a valid visa, and that is one of the stumbling blocks to a lot of foreign nationals right now. They are waiting for their appointment at the consulate or at the embassy in their country so that they can get their visa renewed, because during the pandemic, all the embassies and consulates were closed. Visas expired and there was no way to get them renewed. And now when they opened up, the appointments for 6 months to a year in advance. So if you are aware of the options that we have, we could do the DSCR option that does not require the visa, and you could still do it. They just have to sign in their country. They can't obviously come to the US if they don't have a visa, if they are from a non-visa waiver country. I should add that to there. This is the visa requirement is for if they are from a non-visa waiver country. For example, Canada is a visa waiver country. Canadians do not need a visa stamped on their passport to come here. Many European countries are also visa waiver countries. They don't need a visa to come here. But then for those that are not a visa waiver country, the visa requirement applies unless you're using our streamline option, which does not require that. And also, if not signing in the US again, but also does not require a credit reference letter or letters, and does not require a CPA letter for housing expense reference. So a lot easier option, believe it or not. Those can be difficult references.
So Jose, what do they require for that streamlined option?
Oh, I know. It sounds almost like back in the days when you just put a mirror in front of them, and if they had a breath, if there was a fog on the mirror, you were approved, right? Well, for the purchase, obviously, they cannot have U.S. credit, or else they need credit, right? But for that option, if it's a purchase, you need to have your passport to confirm the country that you're from. You need to verify the assets for the purchase, right? And the assets have to be seasoned for 2 months. Not seasoned here for 2 months necessarily. Just you're going to be drawing them out of an account, so you're going to have to provide the info from the account they're being drawn from if it's not already here in the U.S., which means they have to have a U.S. account. That's a stumbling block for some people. They got to have a U.S. bank account, and then the money for the down payment and the 12 months of reserves of PITI and the closing cost has to be in the U.S. account and verified prior to the clear to close. So that's mainly the one thing that could hold some people back would be I don't have an account there. But again, there's some private banking banks. You just got to do some searches that do have subsidiaries in other countries where you can open up the account, and if you provide them the proper documentation and they are a proper type bank like an HSBC, for example, right, then you can open the account there, and then they'll give you the money here could be credited here as well. But that's usually going to be one of the other tough points, that the account has to be here the money has to be here in the U.S. already. So eligible for 1 to 4 unit properties, manufactured homes as well, and condos. I think we have a manufactured home option, I believe up to 70% on the DSCR on a purchase. Personal or entity ownership is allowed, although I mentioned highly recommended in an LLC. And there are fixed, flip, and ground up bridge loan options for foreign nationals. Also, had to throw that in there because they're in the game too of the fixed flip. There's usually just going to be a little bit of an add on to the cost for being a foreign national, maybe some LTV adjustments, stuff like that. But they will do it. And if they have prior experience doing a fixed flip, even better. If they don't, we have options for them, but that is a possibility. So again, stream DSCR, especially the streamline option, is amazing. And then we do have full doc for those that need to have that because they want to reside in the property as a second home, come for a month, 2 months, 3 months at a time, 6 months, however long their visa says that they can be here. That's fine. When they're not using the property, they can rent it short term because there's no long term lease on a short term rental, so it doesn't violate the mortgage agreement that they have with the bank as a second home. And it's not DSCR, so they don't sign that scary disclosure that they're never going to live in the home. So uh, keep in mind it's 43% max DTI, so do your math well. Don't mess up and get the wrong letter in there, and then you're off thinking it's 50%. It's 43% DTI for these. But I mean, full doc is so easy. It's self-employed is a CPA letter from their country where the income originates, right? And we need the license of the CPA as well. And if they're salaried, it's a verification letter, which we have forms for these form letters that they can use as an example, completed and signed by their employer. No tax returns, just like a verification of employment type document. That's full doc. And then the full doc is also going to require bank reference letters as a credit reference or credit reference letters from creditors as a credit reference. They're going to require a resume of business experience, most likely. So, again, full doc, good option, but not really an LTV bump. It's 75% is the max. However, on the full doc loan, as you'll see in tomorrow's session when we show you some structures, and if you would have been on this morning's show, that the full doc option does have a lower rate. You got to jump through a few hoops of fire. But if I recall this morning, the full doc option at the lowest cost was 8.5% with a minimal buy down. And the DSCR option with like a minimal buy down. The streamline option was like 9.75, and the DSCR non-streamline option was like I think 9.125. So it's a nice bit of a lower rate for the full doc. Now, one of the things and one of the things that we changed since the last time we had this training, and this is the part that escapes a lot of people, right? And this is the one that holds up the most approved foreign national loans and keeps them delays your closing is the closing, the actual physical signing of the documents and notarization of the necessary documents that need to be notarized. Because if you don't plan this is a logistical planning event here. If you don't plan this at least 2 weeks before you want the closing to occur, your closing is going to be delayed. And in some cases, the planning may have to occur a little bit longer than that because you got to figure out where they're going to close, right? This should be a conversation at the beginning of the application, not at the end of the application. When you're taking the application, you got to ask them, are you planning to come to the U.S. to sign at the closing, or are you going to sign in Colombia, for example, if I'm talking with a Colombian national? And then they're going to let me know, oh no, most Hispanic borrowers, like we're mentioning in all of our trainings, are high context individual. They want to feel it, right? They want to experience it. They'll probably come and sign in person. But you have other foreign nationals, like the Canadians. They don't want to sign here. They just want to close. They have no problem with signing wherever. But the issue is, if you don't plan it, that's what so if they're going to sign in the embassy, okay, or the consulate, where is it? Is it how far is it from their home? Do they got to fly there? Can they drive there? How far in advance do they have to make an appointment with the consulate or the embassy in order to have them notarize the documents, right? Um, if they're Canadian, could it be possibly easier for them? Are they living close to the border that they may just want to drive over, or if they're in Mexico near the border, could they just drive over and meet a U.S. notary right near the border on the U.S. side to sign? I mean, because the in-person part in the U.S. doesn't mean in person at the closing of the title company. That just means in person in the U.S. with a U.S. notary. You know, uh, Now another option, which is a one that could really save you, but which again has to be planned ahead, is the remote online notarization option. There's multiple vendors that offer that. Like I think one of the more popular ones is called Notary Cam. However, it's really important to note that first, the remote online notarization process needs to be approved by the investor or lender where the loan is going, right? I mean, in the end, they have to accept that package like that. So you have to make sure that they accept the process, right? So if you got the green light from there, then you have to make sure that the title company, and we had one that was trying to be closed like this recently in our company, and at the last minute, turns out the title company didn't approve it because they just didn't approve the fact that how the ID is verified on the remote online notarization, right? Because they don't have US ID, they don't have a US passport, they don't have a US driver's license. They're going to be providing some sort of alternative documentation other than what a US notary is going to require. So you have to make sure that the title company accepts that, because they're the ones that are guaranteeing title, guaranteeing that package and all that kind of stuff. So even though they're not going to be physically witnessing the documents, they have to accept the form, whatever ID was used to vet the borrower as being the borrower. Right. In some cases they accept it, in other cases they don't. So that's why the remote online notarization cannot be planned 3 days before you need to close. This is way in advance, right? So these are the most common ways. There's one other one is we just had this one, or somebody tried to do this one in our office. I don't know what's a final on that one. Is an apostille, which is like a type of notary that goes then and takes the stuff to the embassy over there. They notarize it, they take it to the embassy, they do some additional work, and then they send that over. That again needs even more logistical planning than the remote online notarization. So the best one really is going to be remote online notarization. You just have to get it set way in advance. Other than that, hey, there's no problem having them, come and fly over to the U.S., go to the closing. Hopefully, maybe you're local to them. You can say hi to them, all that kind of good stuff. But other than that, this is a conversation. The most important takeaway from this is that this is the conversation that you should be having, not when the file is clear to close, but when you are gathering the documents for the loan. Is where do you plan to be for the closing? In Colombia or in Miami, right? Or somewhere else that we got to do remote online notarization. So in tomorrow's training, we'll get into exact scenarios, pricing scenarios, situation scenarios, quotes, and all that kind of good stuff. So you can dig your teeth into structuring for national loans.
All right, perfect. Looks like we have a couple questions here. So let's see here. Nick, you want to pull them up on the screen? Looks like we got 3 questions. Can closing costs be held in an escrow account like a fintech account such as Chime, etc.?
Well, I'm not aware, but you mean like some kind of an alternative?
It's fine. Chime's a real bank. It's FDIC.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, now, I mean, I don't know why you'd want to hold it. I mean, I guess it doesn't really make a matter as long as, like Nick says, it's some type of a financial institution that we're verifying the funds that has to provide bank statements. And keep in mind, any documentation turned in for the file, if not in English, has to be translated by certified translators, page by page, to English. So all those reference letters and all that, it's always best try to get them in English so you don't have to pay for an extra fee for translating. But one thing to note, there are companies that will do money transfers at a lot cheaper cost than going to their local bank. So there are resources out there to do the transfers. They'll even let you buy spot contracts of the currency to do some currency hedging. So let's say you don't have to close in 6 months. You can buy a 6 month contract for the money and hedge your currency rate fluctuation that way.
All right. Does the money in the bank account have to be seasoned?
The money, if the money is, let's say, coming to a U.S. bank from a bank in their country, we will need to make sure it's seasoned in whatever account it was in. If we're not being provided any other statements other than the money already in the U.S. account, then that money needs to be seasoned at least 2 months, 2 complete months, and that would be for the down payment, for the closing costs, and the 12 months reserves. Now, the 12 months reserves do not have to be segregated and kept in that account after the closing, right? It just has to, you got to verify all that money available. Then after the closing, they can do whatever they need to do with their reserves money, but hopefully it's just keep it in the bank for a rainy day.
All right. Looks like one more or a couple more questions here. Actually, can asset utilization also be an option as well for foreign national?
No, I don't think so. I've never seen asset utilization as a full doc option other than the the CPA letter, because the money needs to be uh, has to originate in their country, and even though that's not like income, it's still a personal income that's being sourced to assets in the U.S.
All right. Another question here. Nick is asking, what is your response to a first-time DSCR investor that asks for advice on how to form an LLC for their purchase? Nick, you want to answer that?
Yeah, this is a good question. Are you talking about a foreign national, though, or are you talking about a U.S. citizen? Because it's very different. For a U.S. citizen, I just did 5 in the last couple hours, so it only takes a couple minutes. For a foreign national, it's a different story. So, a foreign national, to get registered with the state, they're going to need to have a local address, so a registered agent of some kind. So, they're going to need a registered agent service. Nick just said foreign national is what he's asking. So yeah, it's a little more complicated there. So foreign national, they have to have a registered agent service, which I didn't have to have because I registered mine to my address, right? They're going to have the U.S. address. They're usually going to have a representative do it for them as well. They can do it themselves, but they probably are going to want some sort of lawyer or some sort of advisor, financial advisor, help do it for them and actually file with the state. To get an EIN, you must have a social security number. So someone with a U.S. social security number needs to apply for the EIN on behalf of their LLC. Tons of different places will do this for like $250 online. You'll find hundreds of them, and they're basically going to do the registered agent service. They're going to actually file with the state for you, and then they will click the button on the IRS website to file an EIN, which it just takes seconds, literally less than 1 minute. You can get an EIN, but you have to have a social security number. You also have to have a U.S. address to register the EIN too, so they're going to have their registered agent address all worked out ahead of time. So couple little tweaks, but they can do it in 1 day online, no problem. So not a problem you can't solve. If they try to do it themselves, it's going to take them a little while.
And
Also, the state takes a while too. I have filed mine a while ago and just got them today. It took a week for Florida. Some states take a month. Some states take longer. It all depends on the state.
And I think that once you contract the registered agent to set up the LLC and all that stuff, you can also discuss with them the bank account for the LLC, right? Which could be one way to get that account open. Obviously, there's going to have to be some trust here, but they can at least open the account for you. And then once you have the wiring instructions, you can wire money into the account from your country. They don't have to like come and bring in it and like deposit cash. I mean, they can wire. It's just, the account has to be open. So that would be the perfect way to overcome that obstacle.
And that's a little more challenging. Opening up the bank is a little more challenging. So that's where you're not going to have an instant service like Jason had highlighted, LegalZoom, InkFile. There's some online services that are the big companies. They don't really specialize in foreign nationals per se, but I'm sure they have that in their menu of services. There are some that specialize in foreign nationals, but the bank account is a tricky issue because you have to have your ID. You have to be present in person at the bank to sign and prove identity that you are you. So if it's a single member LLC and you're not allowing someone else to manage that for you, sometimes you can get a lawyer to be the manager of the LLC and not own the LLC, but manage it and sign on behalf. That would be more expensive because then you don't just get LegalZoom. LegalZoom doesn't have really lawyer services, right? Where they're going to represent you as they're your legal lawyer in the US, right? That would be where you need someone actually to represent you. It's actually on paper as the LLC manager, so they can then go to the bank and open up those for you. If they're trying to open up just in their name, they can click one button there, Nick and Jason, but they won't necessarily be able to open the bank account. So the other workaround there, like for the Canadians, would be a multinational bank. Like, what are the ones, Jose, that are more common?
I think at RBC, I think Royal Bank of Canada
And
has a bunch of
the HSBC too, as
Yeah.
well, right?
Mhm.
HSBC.
Yep.
A couple of the Canadian ones are easily accessible. There are some Latin American ones that are accessible. What are your ones for Latin America that they've used before, Jose?
Not too many. There's been a consolidation in that market.
Yeah. Um,
Citibank was probably one of the ones that is international.
yeah, that's definitely the bigger challenge there, though, for sure, is getting the actual bank account.
All right, well, let's go ahead and wrap it up. We do have this part 2 of this tomorrow, so 7 p.m. Eastern time. This Wednesday, we will do part 2 of this, as Jose said, go over some real life examples, go over some rates, go over how to structure the actual loan. So we will see you tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.